Welcome back. Today, we are diving into ISO 27001 Annex A 5.1, the return of assets. Now, this is an essential part of asset management. Why? Because you want to ensure that employees or third parties leave their assets when they were given, or the assets that they were given when they leave the company. Now, return of assets means that you are collecting the laptops, the badges, other equipment before someone departs to avoid any form of data leak. Now, if you don't manage this well, you could face serious security risks like data leaks, loss of sensitive information, and so on and so forth. Now, let's break this down into very clear and best practices. One, you need to be able to understand the asset management process. Now, when we talk about the asset management process, or before we get into the asset return, it's important that we know where it fits within a larger asset management strategy. Now, your organization should already have what we call an asset management policy. You need to have an asset inventory and also a defined process for assigning and returning assets. Now, when we say an asset management policy, you need to set rules for handling assets. So your policy needs to be stated and say that or you need to have a policy that talks about the written guidelines that everyone should follow. Now, an asset inventory or an asset register is a record of who has what. Because an inventory, as you know, talks about it's either a spreadsheet or a list of all the various systems that we have in our organization and who owns these various systems. Now, a well-defined process, that is the third one, for assigning and returning assets. Now, this ensures that assets are being tracked and recovered when no longer needed. Every organization issues assets. If you have a job and you're working remotely, you have a laptop, you have a mobile device, you have a security token that you use to be able to log into certain environments, there's an external hard drives, and you also have a badge. Now, the challenge is ensuring that they are returned when they are no longer required. Or if not, those assets could hold company data, the customer's information, and sensitive IP addresses that could fall into the wrong hands. Always remember, your employees are your greatest assets that you need to be able to protect yourself against. Now, let's get into the process. Step one, you need to keep track of your assets. The first key to effective asset returning is having an up-to-date inventory. Now, every issued asset should be recorded in a register, and you need to make sure that who is it assigned to? When was it issued? What type of asset it is? What is the estimated date of return, if possible? And mostly we use a spreadsheet to be able to do that, or a software to be able to keep inventory of this. In this way, when someone leaves or their contract ends, there is no confusion about whether they need to come back and return their assets. And it brings clarity where everyone knows exactly what item they collected and what they need to return. Step two, you need to integrate asset return with HR processes. Now, for employees, the offboarding process should include an asset return step. This should be built into the processes itself. Why? Because if you don't build it as part of the process, you realize that when employees leaving an organization, majority of the time they care less about what is going on. And so they don't really take note of those things. So you need to have two things. One, an exit interview and a final clearance checklist. An exit interview is where you have a discussion with employees to hand over their devices. Then the final clearance checklist is where the HR and the IT will confirm all the assets that are being returned before closing out their various accounts. And I hope this makes sense to you. Now, what this does is that this prevents employees still having company devices, having a badge access, and having data storage devices that could even pose a risk to the organization. Now, step three, you need to be able to manage your third-party asset returns. If your organization provides access to contractors, vendors, or some service providers, your process can be trickier. Why? Your third-party supplier management process should be able to have a list of all the third parties that you are working with. Now, if you have contractors and vendors or service providers, we say it's trickier because you will realize that now it's difficult tracking everything that you have given to all your third-party organizations. So when you're working with external partners, you need to make sure that one, the contract you have with them will specify the asset return procedures or the step-to-step instructions before they receive company equipment. The offboarding process should include an asset return requirement. Then there should be a tracking mechanism for any asset that is being issued to any third party. For example, if you provide secure laptops to a marketing agency, there must be a structured process to recover devices before revoking their system access. Just to make sure that you have all these assets. And these are things that ISO in their certification process looks out for. Now, the step 4 talks about how handling remote employees and asset returns. With more companies now offering remote work, retrieving of assets from other sites or from the employees needs to be taken a critical look at. And so you need to put an extra layer in place. Now, you need to have trusted courier services. Ensure that assets are returned securely with tracking. You need to have drop-off locations where your local branch or your local office branches or designated collection points, the employee can go in and drop off these assets. Then you need to remotely wipe capabilities. If a device is lost and it's not being able to return, you need to make sure that you have activated a remote wipe capability that can delete all data over the internet even before the employee brings it to the organization or when it gets into the wrong hands. This is a best practice that helps to initiate a remote wipe before the device enters a courier network. Even though the courier can provide tracking and insurance, remember there's always a risk around. There's a probability that the package can be stolen or lost. Now, the step 5. You need to ensure compliance and audit readiness. Now, since ISO is heavily documentation based, an auditor will expect clear evidence that assets are being properly managed. When you are retrieving assets, they are likely to check one, a list of the assets that have been returned over a set period of time, like 6 months to 12 months, the documentation proving that the process was followed, such as what was the exit form, did you have the exit interview, what was the response, what are some of the meeting minutes from the interview that you had, an up-to-date asset register that reflects all the assigned and returned assets, then the contracts with third parties that outline asset return policies. Now, a common mistake that many organizations occur or go through is that they are failing to keep the asset register updated. If an auditor finds assets still assigned to former employees, it raises a red flag. Keeping the register current at all times avoids last-minute scrambling before an audit. Now, what are some of the common pitfalls that we need to avoid? There are 3 that I have listed here that I want you to be able to take note of. You need to make sure that the outdated asset registers have lack of a clear process for returning assets and failure to be able to securely destroy returned assets. Now, when I say outdated asset register, you need to make sure that if your records are not updated regularly, you know or you won't know who has what from the organization. And so you need to be able to update that. Secondly, you need to be able to make sure that there is a process or a clear process for returning assets. So if assets return isn't part of your exit procedures, meaning that you have certain gaps that you need to be able to make sure that things doesn't slip through those cracks. Then the last one is the failure to securely store or destroy returned assets. Now, when devices left in unsecure locations still pose a threat, so if they are returned, you need to make sure that all those things are being taken care of. And I hope this gives you a better understanding of asset management. Now, let's wrap up this section. Now, when you're managing assets return, it is very straightforward. But remember that it's a critical part of your information security. Now, it helps companies to protect their data, ensures compliance, and prevents unauthorized access to sensitive information. To implement the ISO Annex A 5.11 very well or effectively, you need to focus on these things as we have talked about in this section. Maintaining an up-to-date assets register, integrating the assets return into offboarding and HR processes, managing the third-party assets with contractual agreements, and ensuring secure retrieval for remote employees. And the last one is making sure that you are keeping records updated for audit and compliance. If you get this process right, I'm telling you, are going to reduce security risks, improve compliance, and make audit a lot easier for you and for your organization. Thanks for watching. Make sure you check out our next video where we'll break down another key ISO 27001 Annex A Control. See you there.